Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. We are thrilled to have photographer and documentary filmmaker Richard Sandler as tonight's guest speaker. Richard's education in photography is largely self-taught. He did, however, take a formative workshop with Gary Winogrand in 1977. In the following year, he audited Ben Lifson's lectures at Harvard and Charles Harbut's seminar at MIT. His photographs are in the permanent collections of the New York Public Library, the Museum of the City of New York, the Brooklyn Museum, the New York Historical Society, and the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. His monograph, The Eyes of the City, was published in 2016 by Powerhouse Books and is now in its second printing. Richard was good enough to bring a few copies for sale. So we have it here in-house after the lecture. Time magazine has called him the unsung street photographer of 1980s New York. Richard has directed and shot 8 nonfiction videos and films, including The Gods of Times Square, Brave New York, and Radioactive City. He is the recipient of awards from the New York Foundation for the Arts, Guggenheim Foundation, and New York State Council on the Arts. Whether he is shooting or filming the streets of New York, Richard matches the intensity of the city frame by frame. There is an implicit and unconditional acceptance of the city in his body of work, a love letter really. So please help me welcome Richard Sandler to our lecture series.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. Maybe I should start off by saying one thing that might not be obvious to everybody, which is that I don't shoot digital photography. I was, however, as far as I know, the first digital photographer, certainly amongst my circle of friends, because in 1996, I was already 3 years into shooting a lot of video on the street in New York City. I bought the first 3-chip mini DV camera called the VX1000, and the VX1000 had a still function, and so it was shooting digital stills. It was quite cool because you could make a still photograph shot as a still. I'm not talking about pulling a frame out of video. I'm talking about an actual still camera embedded within a video camera, a different function of it. And I was walking around the city shooting stills like crazy. And nobody knew that as I was blowing by them, I was shooting video. If they had any recognition of the camera that I was using, it looked like a video camera, and of course it was. But very few people knew that it had a still function. So it was quite cool to walk around the city and make video stills, and I wound up including a number of them in the first documentary that I made on video called The Gods of Times Square. And you can actually see that online if you want. But my actual practice is film. And as I got more and more into video, I graduated from that into shooting motion picture film. So shooting Super 8 film, 16 millimeter film, and 35 millimeter film as well for documentaries that I am making still. They're mostly finished in terms of the shooting and the recording and the sound recording and so forth. However, they're not edited, but they will be soon. And the reason why they're not edited is because it cost a fortune to scan motion picture film. I'm sure some of you may know about that. It's a lot of money, and so I've had to raise it. But I've been able to do that, so I'll be beginning to edit a documentary that I've been making for a number of years on Martha's Vineyard. And it's called AKA Martha's Vineyard. And the documentary is the history of the lovely island of Martha's Vineyard, but from the point of view of the members of the Wampanoag tribe that have been living there for tens, who knows how many thousand years before Europeans showed up in the 17th century. But the film includes that as well. So it's I'm looking very forward to finally finishing this documentary that I started in 1992. So I started to roll the tape back a moment here. No, don't you roll the tape back. I started shooting still photography in 1977. I had 2 careers previous to that, which were involved in basically helping people. One as a macrobiotic natural food chef at the beginning of the natural foods movement in the late 60s. This is in Boston. And the second career was as an acupuncturist. I went to England and trained and got my degree to practice acupuncture in England and the Commonwealth countries, and then came back here. There was no licensing procedure at this point, early in the days of when acupuncture first arrived on these shores, about 1970, 71. And did that for a number of years, and then kind of burned out of doing things, quote unquote, for other people, and wanted to do something, quote unquote, selfish for myself, and didn't want to be tied down, because if you're an acupuncturist, you really can't go anywhere because you have relationships with a bunch of people who you're working with on health issues and so forth, and you really can't leave. So I couldn't travel or anything like that. And anyway, so I got into photography in a very, very fortuitous way. I moved into a wonderful house in Cambridge, Mass, and there was a photographer living in the house. The house was owned by an esteemed Harvard psychologist, and his friends were people like, well, he hired and fired Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, a.k.a. Barbara Ramdas. He had been the head of the psychology department at Harvard. They were Quakers. They raised 5 kids. The kids were gone, and they had an empty nest syndrome, and so they let the rooms out, a huge house, for like $30 a month. And we'd have these wonderful meals with the likes of Buckminster Fuller or Harvey Cox or anyone, Gregory Bateson, if these names mean anything to any of you, I don't know. But so I landed into this wonderful sort of foment of creative energy and also achievement, because this man whose house and wife whose house I was living in, he was his field was motivational psychology, and he invented this thing called the Thematic Aptitude test, which is still used today. And it's a test that basically, you know, you score and it measures your aptitudes in certain areas. And it's actually a very important indicator for hiring people, particularly in, you know, positions of importance, I suppose. I don't know, maybe I'm overstating that. But anyway, so there was a dark room in the basement, and a friend of mine was taking a class at Harvard with a great lecturer on photography, and he was the former photography editor of the, when I say photography editor, that's actually not right. He was the photo critic for the Village Voice. The Voice had its own dedicated critic in those days that went and reviewed shows. His name was Ben Lifson, very, very smart guy. He wrote the introduction to Matt Weber's book called Urban Prisoner, if any of you have seen that. And he allowed me to sit in on his class. I was not a matriculated Harvard student, but I could sit in on the class if I didn't talk and just absorb things. So that was the first time I saw the work of, you know, André Cortège and Henri Cartier-Bresson and Gary Winogrand and you name it, Robert Frank and so on. And I was just, you know, just smitten, absolutely smitten. And I never wanted to do anything other than street photography. Since I'm a New York City street kid, I grew up on the streets, I grew up in Queens, but at the earliest possible age, like around 10, I started taking the subway into the city from Forest Hills, which, as you probably know, is not very far away, 20-minute ride. And I just hang out in Times Square and, you know, go to the sideshows and go to the penny arcades and go to the movie theaters, of course. When the Dion Arbus retrospective was at the Whitney, I guess before the Whitney moved some years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years, 6 years ago, something like that. There were photographs in there that she had taken in what was called Hubert's. It was called Hubert's Flea Circus because there was an actual flea circus there. Flea Circus is this sort of miracle of miniaturization where fleas are fitted, in this case with Roman gladiator costumes, fitted with costumes, and you look at them under a magnifying glass that's about 1 foot or 1.5 feet thick. So people would gather around this very large magnifying glass and look down and see these fleas moving around, but you know, greatly enlarged because of the magnifying glass. Anyway, this was my introduction to the adult world. Times Square was my introduction to the adult world, and I was just amazed by it. And I just couldn't wait to grow up and be able to be part of that. Of course, fast forward to 1992, and there I am, you know, back in Times Square making a documentary about the place. And I felt so comfortable there because I had, you know, literally grown up there. Of course, this was a very different Times Square in '92 than when I was a kid. So anyway, in this journey, this fortunate journey of mine to become a photographer, that very first summer after the class at Harvard, Ben mentioned that Winogrand was going to be in town teaching a weekend workshop. And I took it. And that was just fantastic. We went out for 3 days and shot, came home at night, developed film, made prints in the darkroom, put them up on the wall the next day, and Winogrand would sort of critique them. He was not very talkative about pictures. If he liked a photograph, he would just hit it with his finger, and he wouldn't talk about it. And a couple people were very upset with him and got kicked out of the class because he wouldn't say anything. I mean, they'd spent good money to be in this class, and he wouldn't say anything about why a picture worked or didn't work. And he actually had to kick a couple people out. There was only like 6 people in the class anyway, so he was affecting his own bottom line. I mean, they were getting a refund probably. This was at the New England School of Photography, you know, a school not unlike this one. Although this is, I know, not only photography, but that is, and I don't know if it still exists anymore. It still exists, yeah, NESOP. So I watched him like a hawk, and I really learned, I think, in one weekend, everything that I needed to learn how to comport myself in the sense of how to, you know, walk around the street and begin to, you know, make photographs that were unimpinged by a lot of forethought and unimpinged by technical problems. In other words, he showed me how to zone focus the camera, set it at 6 feet, walk around, you know, take pictures from 6 feet, and so forth. And it just opened up a whole new, incredible world for me. And I went at it like a maniac and very quickly got work in Boston as a photojournalist. And I was always very attracted to photojournalism from the very beginning. And I feel like my life has been about photojournalism. I mean, a lot of street photographers don't like to talk about what they do as photojournalism, but it is that. It's a snapshot of a moment in time, of course, and it has, you know, historical affects that are, you know, will last forever, and not really even that different, you know, than a cave painting. You know, we live on a planet that's changing all the time, and you've got people, you know, 30, 40,000 years ago making a picture of a lynx or an oryx or whatever the animal would be. And that's a moment in time as well. And everything's changing, so that's a snapshot from back then. And photographs, you know, still do that very same function today, obviously. So I could show you some of these pictures from my book. There's you know, I was really fortunate. You know, this one, for instance, I'm rather glad that these three women look like they probably just came out of the hairdresser. You know, all getting more or less the same do, wearing you know, fur coats, and seeing maybe perhaps younger versions of themselves. Who knows? Your mind can run wild. Anyway, I was very attracted to Fifth Avenue because I grew up a lot there. My family was kind of a show business family. My mother was an actress. She was a radio actress and a TV actress. And my godfather, who raised me as much as my own father, if not more, was a pioneer, shall we say, in radio and television himself. He's wrote the intro. He was a press agent at DC Comics when they got the property called Superman, and he wrote the introduction, faster than a speeding bullet, you know, more powerful than a speeding locomotive, look up in the air, it's a bird, etc. And he became the first, he was 20 years old, and they said, here, kid, see what you can do with this. They bought this property for $100, that was it. And so he invented the characters of Lois Lane, Perry White, and Jimmy Olsen, which were not originally part of the first intellectual property, essentially, that they bought from a person. I forget the person's name. And he was very smart and knew that our Superman had to be the opposite of the Nazi Übermensch. So our Superman was an ordinary guy on one hand and extraordinary on the other. He was very kind-hearted. He was kind to women. He believed in integration. He believed in universal suffrage. He was just an all-around great guy, you know, disguised as a mild-mannered reporter. But he did things for the betterment of for America, and in those days, truth, justice, and the American way meant kindness, compassion, inclusion, you know, the exact opposite of where we're at right now to a large extent. But that's another question, and one that we really should go into, you know, at some point. Why? You know, what happened? How did it go from that to this? And I have a lot of feelings about it. Anyway, so I did have this background in the arts, and I had, you know, like big shoes to fill, in a sense. So when I started street photography, I had already jettisoned my other two careers. There really wasn't any going back. I mean, I still knew how to cook for people and still do, but I didn't want to go back into the restaurant business, and I didn't want to practice acupuncture anymore. So anyway, I was fortunate. I was able to get work in Boston, and then after a couple of years of working in Boston, I moved back home to New York City, where I'm from, and just began shooting in earnest every single day. Initially, I was a messenger, a foot messenger with a beeper. Actually, when I put this mic on, it brings me back to wearing a beeper. I feel good. This is it. This feels like photography to me, you know. But it's a mic. It's not a beeper. But it would go off, and it would tell me where to go, you know, to pick up a package and, you know, bring it from here to there. But in the process, I was able to get pictures because, you know, it was like being a cab driver. I had no idea where I would go, and then I would be there, and there would be pictures, you know. Of course, there's pictures everywhere if you're looking for them. So, but in this case, there was, you know, I let the beeping determine where I was going to go. I did also, by the way, shoot from a cab. I drove a cab in Boston, And I shot pictures when I was driving a cab in Boston. Anyway, so I'm probably talking too much. So some of these pictures, you know, you just get lucky. When you're doing it all the time, you're throwing out a fairly big net, obviously, and you're bound to get something. I mean, even a monkey with a camera strapped to its head will get pictures too, once in a great while. But over time, you start to, you know, learn a little bit. And in this case, I knew for sure there was a picture here, and whether I would get it or not was highly in question. I probably shot 3 or 4 rolls. This is, you know, not my usual modus operandi. I don't usually, this is a 90mm lens. I don't usually shoot with a 90mm lens, but I always carry one just in case. So this book that I made, it's called The Eyes of the City, and it documents basically the years through my eyes, obviously not through anybody else's, but through my eyes from 1977 until 2001, but before 9/11. I stopped. When 9/11 happened, I had no interest in shooting stills anymore. It was too quaint, it was too romantic, you know, plus, you know, what was important was what people were saying. People were crying, people were you know, angry, people were, you know, just out of their minds in insane amazement at the horror of what happened. And still photography for me just seemed like the wrong medium. So starting right around, I mean immediately after 9/11, although I'd been shooting quite a bit already on the street with video at that point, but after 9/11, I basically put the still camera down for a little while. Or I'd carry it with me, but I wouldn't wind up shooting very much. It was mostly about video. But so that's why these photos here include the World Trade Center, because I was always photographing it. And also, you know, remember that the World Trade Center was bombed for the first time in 1993. And that really spooked me, and I always felt like something would probably happen again. So these photos were made after all the pictures, there's 3 or 4 of them in the book, were made after 93. So The Eyes of the City is the title of the book, and it's obviously, you know, my eyes, but it's people's eyes as well. Very often either looking at me or seeing into their eyes, you know, a sensibility or an emotion. So I really approached it in an extremely intuitive way, and you know, it was a lot easier to photograph then than now, I think, because I don't know, people seem very uptight about the possibility of, you know, pictures getting into social media. There's probably nothing more boring to me than photographing somebody on a cell phone, you know, because they're not really there. They're somewhere else. They're not on the street. They're not involved in the business or the life of the street. Really, their attention is somewhere else. I love film photography because it doesn't require electricity. It doesn't inherently require electricity to make an image. Still photography greatly precedes the invention of electricity, and it's not necessary. Of course, it'd be heroic at this point to make an enlarger with a, you know, with a candle, but that's what they were used, you know, amplified by mirrors. But these magic lanterns were what people used way back, or they made contact prints, you know, from a large format negative, glass plate negative, that is. Anyway, so yeah, you're just seeing, you know, these, you know, I'm just walking around. I'm just looking for pictures. That's all I'm doing all day long. And I approached it with a lot of passion, I guess. You know, This one was 1978. Before there was any graffiti on the F. This is F train. Before there was any graffiti on the F train. Not that there was ever that much, but like the, not like the IRT, which was just bombed, out the window. But this is also on the F train, and this was a important picture for me when I made this one, just to have that many dramas going on in a single frame it's very hard to do. There's a lot of luck involved. This is not with a motor winder, so it's one shot, so it keeps you extremely alert. You really, the less technical things that favor you, the more aware you're going to be to shoot, intensely. But, and this is actually the very last photograph that I made that is in this book. And this was the spring or like February, I think, of 2001. You can see what's about to happen, particularly with the guy on the right. The guy on the left is an Orthodox Jew, but the guy on the right, is, beginning to see that, sort of hipster look. The subways were really in bad shape in the sense of the lights were out a lot, the doors didn't work, they were kind of scary, people got mugged, crack was going crazy in New York, there was a lot of tension. What's his name? Bernhard Goetz, had shot these poor kids on the train, and New York was really, really on edge. But I have to say, I never felt too scared, and always had the camera out. A couple times, kids tried to mug me, but I outran them. I don't know, you're young and, you believe in yourself or whatever. I could never do this now, It's like, this is a young man's work, right? I could never do that then. This is actually the very first good picture I took. That's in Boston, this newsboy looking at his cross. The entrance to the subways in Boston look almost cathedral-like. And when I saw that, that was it. That was the first good picture I made, and I was just so hooked, I can't tell you. And I would have this horrible recurring, I had a Leica at this point, and I would have this horrible recurring dream that happened almost every night, where somebody was trying to steal my camera. I don't know if you ever had that dream. I'm sure some of you have. And then I listened to a friend of mine, and I got insurance. I got photo insurance. And I didn't have the dream again. It was great, So from the beginning, I started using the flash on the street. And in this case, I'm obviously right up on this guy, but the flash is in my left hand, and it's around his back, and the light is going on him. So, there were a couple of us shooting with the flash, and we're kind of pushing the boundaries of how to use the flash. In this case, really disguising that there's even a flash here at all, except when you see his face, you can see that, there is a slight blur from the ambient exposure, but there's still the frozen image of his face. This one too, this one also, in this one wasn't as necessary, but the flash is actually around the back of his head. That's why there's light there, and it is illuminating him ever so slightly. It was a very great day. The reason why I was using the flash from the beginning was because in the middle of the winter, it's really dark out in February and March, and there's on a gray day, there's like no light, and light is essential to a stealthy street photographer, because you want to shoot at f8, you want to shoot at f11, you want to shoot at apertures that give you, you know, enough depth of field, if you know what I'm talking about. Probably most of you do. That allow you margin for error. So if you're focused at 6 feet and you take it from 4 feet, chances are it's going to be in focus. Actually, it's more than chances, it will be in focus if you're, you know, shooting at a high enough shutter speed. So it allowed me to get pictures on lousy days in New York, and I actually came to want the lousy day, because then I could use the flash and extend the shutter. So instead of shooting at the synchronization speed, which on my camera is a 50th of a second, I would be shooting maybe at an 1/8 of a second. And then that image would be blurry, of course, because you can't really hold the camera, even a Leica, at an 1/8 or a 1/4 of a second to get a, you know, rock solid image. But people are in motion, and so you see their blur, but then the flash goes off, and then that just, you know, freezes it, you know. So there were these two images built in one. Yeah.
Did the flash make you more noticeable as a street photographer?
Exactly. So the flash changed, you know, the whole dynamic to a very large extent. It changed it, because there's no disguising the fact now that you've made a photograph with the flash. And if you work close to people with the flash, you know, then, you know, it's a whole different ballgame. So, but that was okay. I felt like, you know, I'm doing this. I'm taking responsibility for it. I don't want to cause any heart attacks, but I mean, I really don't. I don't do it now. I don't want to do it now, but I did want to do it then, and you know. But every once in a while, I get in trouble, of course. And yeah.
Were you also pushing film in those days?
No, none of this film, Ruben, is pushed at all. Absolutely none. I was shooting in 400 ASA. The only time I ever pushed film was for jobs. I did a big essay for the Times on homeless people in 1983 when deinstitutionalization happened, when they just opened up the doors to all the mental institutions and just, you know, basically the people just, they threw them out onto the street. And then I pushed it, because I was, you know, shooting in, you know, like you know, Penn Station at night or Grand Central at night, and the light's bad, and I had to get, you know, I had to push the film. But none of this film is pushed at all. It's just developed at 400 ASA with maybe a little bit of a goose, you know, to.
What was your favorite developer?
My favorite, oh, we're really down in the nitty-gritty now.
This is like a photo thing.
Yeah, all right, D76, you know, very boring. D76, and for a while, no, for a while I was replenishing D76, which I liked very much, because it still got the same speed, but, you know, it's a little bit softer. It's not as edgy as D76 can be. But I liked D76 very much. I experimented with developers for a while, but I was very happy with what D76 gave me, so I just stuck with that and I tried to maximize my shooting time, you know, and my darkroom time, but I didn't do a lot of experimenting. I was very happy with Dectal, I was very happy with D76, and I'm still basically doing the same thing. We'll do a few more here. Now this one, you can clearly see the blur here. And then the flash goes off. So, you know, it's two images. And it starts to, you know, the thing I loved about this, this technique was that, you know, it starts to really create a narrative in and of itself. You know, aside from what's going on, quote unquote, in the picture, the technique itself seems to have a narrative, and I really like that very much about it. One other thing that I didn't mention that I do want to mention is when I was probably 11 or 10, I had the great good fortune of meeting Salvador Dali in his prime. my parents would go to, my godparents, you know, went to these really cool restaurants in New York that were, you know, very fine French restaurants, and you know, so I was exposed to, you know, like this incredibly well-made food. And anyway, Dali had his own table in this restaurant, in the bar area of the restaurant. It was called Le Baroque. It was on 53rd between Madison and 5th. And it's a deli now. but anyway, this was the most fabulous French food, however, cooked by Italian people. And I met Dali there. So this type of surreal over magnification, shall we say. You know, you see that in Dali's work a lot, these strange forms that are nearer to you, and they're grotesque, and they're dream images. And, you know, he also was a student of psychoanalysis as well, and Freud was, you know, the big guy in town in those days. So, I don't mean New York, but I mean just generally. I mean, as years went on, I became more of a Jungian, you know, so then my pictures became more subtle. But at this point, you know, it reminds me a little bit of Dali. That's why I'm saying it. But that was always in my mind. I love surrealism. And, you know, things just happen. You know, when you're out there all the time, after a while, you know, stuff just starts coming to you. I really think there are photo gods, and they recognize your ardor, and they send you good pictures. I really believe that. Oh, by the way, in what I said before about Winogrand, when he critiques pictures, he wouldn't, just to finish that thought, the reason why he wouldn't talk about what makes a picture work or doesn't work is because he actually was superstitious. He did not want to upset the muse, that was his word, the muse that allows this magic to happen. He didn't want to talk about it. And he wasn't kidding around, and he didn't. So, you know, if he liked a picture, as I said, he'd do this. That's it, nothing else. It's got the juice, you know, it's got the goods, it's got the ineffable, you know. So, anyway, I talk about it, I don't care. So, you know, thing about street photography too is, you know, it's important to, like, you know, practice it in an artistic sense, like, you know, get ideas of composition in your head and, you know, try to make the pictures. It's one thing to take a picture that's out there, and it's another thing to make a picture that's in here. So, for instance, you know, something like this, I mean, I saw those three women back there, and I took a couple of frames, and it was really clear to me that it needed something more, and then these two guys walked by, and of course there's a lot of luck involved that, you know, I was able to get something, you know, reasonably good. So, you know, the way that she is the point of two triangles, they're the woman in the middle, you know, and, you know, it starts to have a narrative, that's what happens with complicated pictures. It's easy to make a simple picture, but a complicated picture and keep all those balls, you know, up in the air at the same time is not so easy. But that was really what I wanted to do, and I, you know, absolutely admit that, you know, I wanted to shoot like Gary Winogrand, absolutely. I mean, he was, as far as, for me, he was the best. Maybe not the, you know, didn't have the refinement of formal arrangement, you know, that Lee Friedlander has, or, you know, the, you know, knock your socks off intensity of Dion Arbus, but I felt I could make the kind of picture that he made, and so I studied, you know, him very carefully, but, you know, I didn't want to copy. I wanted to do my own stuff. And, you know, I think some of them are my own and not his. But, and for me, like I say, you know, photojournalism is really important. And, you know, racial issues of race, issues of class, issues of age, You know, these are dynamics that are always playing out on the street. And in this case, you know, you see this picture and, you know, it seems kind of normal, but you don't usually see the other way around. You don't see the black woman in the wheelchair and the white woman wheeling the black woman around, and somehow that's okay, you know. And so, you know, these photographs also, you know, hopefully will function in the level of being something, you know, at their best, I should say, as some kind of a meme, you know, that gets under your skin and, you know, begins a conversation, you know, with yourself. The other thing about shooting on the street is it's another thing again to, you know, get interesting subject matter, but putting it in a frame in a way that is not only beautiful but enhances the narrative is a difficult thing to do. In this case, I love the fact that there's a diagonal, you know, from the upper right down to his, you know, shoe right here. You know, another one of these gifts of the photo gods, and the kid has got a little pouch, just like the beggar has a pouch, and, you know, the guy in front, he can't look at it, he's looking back at his wife, or whatever. It's probably his wife, I'm pretty sure it was. But, yeah. So what this represents is, you know, in terms of the actual technique of shooting it, I see her, it's amazing, she's amazingly, you know, like available, I felt. And at first I didn't notice the Rolls Royce and that line that goes off up to the sky, you know. I love it when there's a line that takes you out of a picture so that it's not hitting you over the head, that there's a way out of it. There's another world beyond the picture. It's just a picture, but there's still a way out, and there's a sense of escape, shall we say. But, you know, when people first start out, they'll just go right after her, and at that last second not turn the camera this way to include that, you know. It would be probably more just this, maybe with this. So that's the thing. When I've taught in the past, you know, that's the thing. At that moment of exposure, you know, do this, you know, do whatever you have to do to, you know, move. You look at that frame, and of course, never shoot from the hip. You know, don't. I mean, except I shouldn't say never, but, you know, don't, as a rule of thumb, shooting from the hip is no good, because you can't be certain of the edges of the frame. You can be certain of what's in the middle, but you can't be certain of the edges. And you know, very often the best photographs are made on the edges. You know, when there's really interesting information on the edges of the frame, it really starts to, you know, kind of come out of itself. It gets larger than it is, you know. The narrative goes beyond the frame, and I like that. When I first, this is in Boston, I saw that scroll up there, it said "fuck work," and and, you know, I couldn't have been luckier to see this. This guy, he has surgeon's hands, you know, they're so beautiful, and, you know, these are Boston winos, you know, they're winos, and this guy had obviously spilled a bunch of wine on him before, I think, you know, or something. But, you know, it's Boston, and they wear sports coats up there, even winos. I love that about Boston. It's so conservative. But I was happy to get the hell out of there and move back to New York. But even here, you know, this, I really want that, you know, and I really want that, you know. Just these, you know, ways out. So, you know, what I say is, like, when you see something that's really interesting, gamble with it. Gamble to try to get something even better by forcing the frame to its limit, you know, to doing the most you can do with it, and to take it you know, out of description and from description into narrative, hopefully. And you know, and that happens with this is a feeling, you know, this whoosh up here, you know, this is something that you know, is an additional to the main storyline of the briefcases and the crotches. But you know, I mean, that in itself is a statement, possibly, you know, the male-dominated business world. But then, you know, then there's this. I ran them down. I saw them coming down the street. This is 34th Street near the corner of Park Avenue, just east of Park Avenue on the north side of 34th Street. And I saw those two women walking down. I think they crossed the street. And, you know, I just, you know, that was wonderful. And then I saw this Vidal Sassoon ad, and that couldn't have been better. But even here, I'm doing the same thing. You know, I'm pushing the top, you know. It's like their heads are almost out of the frame. I want to do that. I want to get to the point where, you know, it's better because it's bad. It's better because the technique, you know, it's like, it's not perfect technique, but it pushes the frame a little, and it takes it out of the realm of, you know, perfection, and I don't know, it seems to breathe. This is that same fellow, and I used this picture also in addition to the other one because I really want people to see just how messed up, you know, this poor guy is, with a good haircut and a good beard cut as well, and missing an eye.
Looks as if he's wearing a mask.
Yeah, I know. It's very odd, but probably the shelter that he was in, there was somebody cutting hair. Obviously, I don't think he went to a regular barber looking like that. So these are, you know, a lot of these are, you know, double-page spreads, and that's on one side of the spread, and that's on the other. I'm not subtle sometimes. Now, this is a good one to talk about because, you know, the picture is the picture. The picture's only about the picture. The picture's not about reality, you know. The reality is the picture itself. In this case, I mean, they are holding hands, kind of. It's not that clear, but they're sort of touching. But they were having a conversation, right? And then this train, whatever, I think it was an N or an R or something. This is Lexington Avenue on the BMT. And the train is pulling out of the station, and it's kicking up a lot of dust. And that's why their eyes are closed. And that's why it looks like they're having kind of a romantic and, you know, sort of elegiac moment or something. But they're not. It's just because of the dust. So, you know, it's a good, another thing when I teach, you know, it's a good thing to say, you know, remember, it's just a photograph, it's a frame, and the story that frame tells is not necessarily the reality at all. You know, pictures lie. They absolutely lie, and in good ways. Seems weird from here.
Richard.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us about the editing process in the book?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Your question was, what was the editing process of the book? The process of editing was, you know, me spending, you know, obviously years going through the work and making prints and separating out, you know, one picture at a time, the ones that I wanted to possibly include, and then making a stack of 4x5 work prints of all of those, which was about maybe 300, and then editing the 300 down to 116. And I've just done that again. Actually, I haven't. I have separated out the ones. I'm making a second book, and I have separated out the work for it, but I haven't begun to edit it yet. And then I worked with an editor. Her name is Regina Montfort, and she's a terrific editor. And we worked together and you know, spent a number of days and laid out the pictures on the floor, just like this floor, a big one, like this, and started moving things around. And you know, it's a collaborative edit of both her and me.
Both the selection and the sequence?
Yeah, both the selection and the sequence. I mean, the selection was way more me than her, but the sequence was pretty much 50-50. Although if I didn't like something she'd done, you know, when she left, I just, you know, changed it. But since it's my book, you know, I can do that, you know, so. Yes?
Do you have a particular focal length that you were shooting most?
Yeah, 28 and 35, almost exclusively. This one looks like it's 28. Yeah, 28.
Were you using a prime lens or a zoom?
Only primes. This is in tower number 1. It says One World over there.
Hey, Richard.
Yes.
When you know, looking at these things especially, I mean, the whole everything, and seeing your stuff for years now, I mean, how much are you thinking when you're doing this that, I mean, the world's really not going to be the same in a few years? I mean, you're shooting the subway, but you have no idea that it's going to look like it does now, really, compared to the way it did then, that all that graffiti was going to disappear, that these buildings would no longer be here. And I mean, I've been thinking a little bit more about it historically myself, but what about when you were out doing this, like slogging out there every day, you're thinking about it as history? Did this start becoming a part of your, you know, your thoughts about
I would say
experiencing it?
Yes, it was, because the other thing too that I didn't go into is that you know, there were other people shooting on the street, and you know, I would shoot with you know, there was like a crew of people, you know, Bruce Gilden and Jeffrey Mermelstein and Patrick Pagnano and Cy Rubin. There were a bunch of people out there shooting, and you know, we'd bump into each other all the time, if not shoot together all the time. Sometimes we'd, you know, move in a pack, not that many people, but Pat and I would shoot a lot, and then, you know, Bruce and I would shoot a lot together, and then Pat and Bruce started shooting together, you know, because you can do things with another person that you can't do alone. You know, you can, you know, push the envelope a little more if there's two of you, you know. But it started to get to be a little bit much. But all I'm saying is that the conversations between us, one of the ongoing conversations was the fact that what we're doing now is going to look better in time, you know, and to be careful to try to make pictures that look good now, because in time they'll look better anyway. In other words, so that was something that was very much in my mind. I had no idea that the graffiti was going to go away, but it didn't surprise me. I think I had an inkling that it would go away, because they were trying to get rid of it every which way they could, until they, you know, invented these, got these new cars where, you know, the paint just literally, you know, wouldn't stick to it at all. That's how it ended. You know, not from busting kids for doing it, you know, in the yards or whatever. It was just that the paint wouldn't stay on the car, because they got new cars, you know, at the cost of billions of dollars. I mean, it kind of bankrupted New York, you know, the number of times that New York had to get new subway cars that were graffiti resistant or so. But then the scratching began. You remember when the plexi, you know, the scratching of the plexi, then that became when the cars went, you know, you can no longer put graffiti on the cars, then the scratching became, you know, a big thing. You know, people scratching their tags and such into the plexiglass of the trains. This one, unbelievably, the second to last picture of the book, the moon is here. I'll show it to you later. It goes from here to here. But this was after the first bombing, and the symbolism of, you know, the Ottoman Crusaders' shield was not wasted upon me. You know, I realized I better jump on this, you know. And this is not with a you know, a short lens. This is with a 420 millimeter lens, you know, from my friend's roof on my block in the East Village. But I like photography. I like every aspect of photography. I love landscape. I shot for the Mets for a lot of years. I shot, you know, pictures of the 84, 85, 86 Mets. I worked for the Mets until 92. You know, just another one of those beat photographers with a, you know, a 400 millimeter lens. And, you know, so I like challenges. You know, I like to, you know, learn new stuff. So, you know, I had a 400, but this is a 28. And that's the World Trade Center actually there. That's the Woolworth building that looks like a, you know, something out of Oz. And then here's the flash, you know, so everything is blurry because the flash doesn't touch anything except maybe a little here. The flash is touching that a little bit, but everything else is blurry because the flash doesn't get there, and he's sharp as a tack pretty much because he's so near the flash. And Boston, it's another one of these lucky photographs, you know, that the sidewalk changes tonality right where their hands are touching. And dogs, dogs are a big thing. I've always been photographing dogs a lot. Look at this old-timer's shoe. Whoever that guy was, I don't know. But the thing I like the best about this picture is where the leash here parallels the line. That's what I love, you know. Now, in this case, I'll tell you very quickly. I got there, I saw they were having an argument. The guy looked helpless. His hands were like that for a good 4 or 5 minutes. I took the first 2, 3 pictures without the flash, and then I realized it needed a flash. And so it took me about maybe 60 seconds to get the flash onto my camera, put the battery pack on, plug the flash into the battery pack, set the shutter speed to probably 1/4 or 1/8 of a second, set the flash, whatever. I was not prepared, ready to shoot the flash, and they hadn't moved a muscle. And look how much fabric is in her butt. She is pissed off. And then there's this other thing, you know, they're looking in the window at Bergdorf, you know, I mean, can you believe some architect got paid to design that and put it out into public? It's crazy. It's so phallic. I mean, circumcised, erect, phallus, amazing. Yes.
Hi, I too am a lifer New Yorker, and I first my comment is that I just really, one, you know, great thing about your photography is that you see things that identify that you are in 1977 or 2001 or whatever time frame it is, but then there's also really wonderful parts about your photography that it could be any time, like the scaffolding is something that you know, can see today or in 1977. I'm wondering if, as someone who also wants to shoot my story of New York City, if you were to ask if you were able to tell younger you, you need to shoot more of this because it's going to be important to you later on or to the world later on, what would you say to younger you?
I don't think I would say anything. I was really happy with, you know, the way I approached it. The only thing I would say to that younger me is to be really careful about using the flash more than I was, you know, because I definitely overstepped the line with that a couple of times, you know, and really upset people, and I really felt bad about that. You know, I just, you know, you have to approach it sort of like a sociologist. You know, that everything that you're shooting is of now, everything, you know, and with time, it's going to look, you know, funkier. I mean, believe it or not, people walking down the street with cell phones is someday going to look very funky compared to what's probably, you know, coming on down the line, you know, the next iteration of this communication technology. You know, whether it's chip implants or whatever, but believe it or not, you know, the most boring thing on the street is going to actually look funky. I'm guessing, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Who knows? You know, it's just a chance you take. You know, but still, really, what it's about is, you know, it's humanity. It's about emotion. It's about feeling. You know, and it's about you seeing that feeling and responding to it, you know, professionally, you know, in a way that, you know, you can make a good photograph. So the technical part of it is super important. I mean, but I studied that a lot. I really read a lot, and like I said, I was, like Jaime said, I you know, was self-taught, but I read a lot, and but you know, all I can say is, you know, that every moment that's, you know, there's still wonderful moments in any walk anywhere in this city. So I wish I could answer your question better, but well, one great thing that I would suggest to you in zone focusing, like, you know, to walk around the street and guess how far you are from things, like how far am I from you, you know, and then focus on me and then see if you were right or wrong. To practice knowing how far you are from things, so that way you don't have to put the camera up to your eye to focus. You don't do that in street photography. I mean, you can, but you're telegraphing your intentions, you know, you're doing that. That draws attention. The best thing is to, you know, already have the camera preset. So that's a great exercise. And also, you know, using a light meter is not necessary. If you use the same film pretty much from day to day, you don't really need a light meter after a while. If you know, constantly use the light meter to know what the light is, and then once you've learned what the shadow is, what the highlight is, and so forth, you can, you know, make pictures, make perfect exposures, you know, close to perfect exposures, and not have to, you know, do that when you're shooting. So anything to optimize. Now, Winogrand, he was really interesting. The first thing that I noticed in him that really blew my mind was, I mean, most people walk around the street, you know, with the camera, you know, like a gunslinger with the camera at their side, you know, and go, you know, like kind of thing. But Winogrand walked around like this. He'd go, no, the camera was right here. It was up here. So the distance between here and here is a lot less than the distance between here and here. So, you know, there would never be the blur of moving and shooting the picture too quickly while the camera is moving up to your eye the way most people shoot. But he'd have it right here, you know, that's how he'd shoot. So, you know, that made a lot of sense. I mean, I absolutely copied that, you know, I mean, you see, you know, a master working and you copy it. in that sense. Technical things, I mean, particularly. But yeah, you know, this was Macy's window, you know. And don't forget her. She likes to look. Yeah, man, it's sexy out there. In those days, it was a lot sexier than it is now. Well, maybe not. It's more porno now. In those days, it was more sexy. But he's looking too. Women wore bustiers, of course, in those days. It reminds me of that Duano picture, you know, the one where the woman is in the window of an art. There's a nude in the picture, and she's looking at it, and she's talking, you know, in France, Paris. That's a young Kate Moss.
Richard?
Yes.
I also had a question for you. How important is New York City to your style? Like, have you shot? I know you shot in Boston. Does the city change your approach as a photographer as well? Is your style part and parcel of New York City?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, you shoot. I'm not one of those people that likes to travel the world and shoot. That was never my bag, you know. A lot of my close friends, they love that. Jeff Jacobson, Alex Webb, Gene Richards, you know, I know they love the sense of the beginner's mind, you know, to go to a new place and to see it fresh, you know. When you live in a place, you start to become inured to it, and you don't, you know, you know, it becomes like you know, familiarity breeds contempt almost, and you don't look enough. But when you travel, you're really open, but that was never my thing. And also, in this period of time, I'm solo raising my son, and so I couldn't go anywhere. You know, I just had to, you know, I was home every night. You know, I was there to meet the bus at 3 o'clock every day. So, you know, it wasn't about traveling ever. So, you know, I didn't really have any other choice. You know, it was just circumstances. But I think, you know, one of the other things that when I've taught, that I've said to people is like, how do you photograph the world you know as if you didn't know it? In other words, go on your regular route, but look at things, you know, in a completely different way, or from a different angle, or with a different film, or with a different something, you know, just to realize the infinite potential that's actually there all the time, that you become inured to if you don't, you know, unless you you know, shake yourself up a little bit. Because it can be you know, repetitive to photograph in the same place, you know, all the time, and it can get boring perhaps. So you know, you got to learn how to shake it up, and you know, get down low, or you know. I mean, I used to do crazy things. I used to take the camera, like I saw a picture the other day. I don't think it's a good picture, but a woman coming down the street, a short woman, maybe her head was about here. And I wasn't looking through the viewfinder, and I put the camera, you know, like above her head, and shot down her body from the top of her head. You know, I'd never seen a picture like that before. But just to be experimental, you know, just to shake yourself up. Anyway, it kind of goes on and on. It's, you know, this is the East Village. This one, people want to know what's going on, and that man, of course, being in a plastic bag is not unusual. You know, homeless people do that because it keeps the wind out. But the noose, that is unusual, and I felt that I really, you know, that was a picture absolutely worth taking, important, because it felt like it was homeless humor, in the sense that, you know, it's so bad out on the street, it's like being lynched. You know, it's like, And I think that's what that was, but I don't know. I heard him breathing. He wasn't dead. More than that, I don't know what to say. You know, these are desperately troubling times, you know, and you know, the way we live is so callous, you know, all of us. And so that's why I wanted pictures like this to be in the book, you know, because you know, street photography can get to be a little artsy-fartsy, you know, if you're not careful. And I wanted to anchor the book also in, I mean, I think the frame is pretty interesting and the flowers and stuff, blah, blah. But, you know, you know, what can you do in a situation like that? This one I want to restage with black kids in strollers and white nannies. So maybe somebody could help me do that. We'll go down to Soho and basically just turn the tables on this, you know. That'd be a fun thing to do. They were really mad at me. Those women were really mad at me. And I think this is a double page spread. Maybe, no, it's not. I think they're one on each page. Unfortunately, you're not seeing the layouts in the book. But yeah, furs, Reagan days. Pictures that ask more questions than they answer. Great thing to do in photography because you can constantly invent scenarios, and I like pictures like this. There's clues, you know, plenty of clues for you to write a story or write an interpretation, but you don't know it. So I like those. Or this one, these two cool guys in Times Square. Who knows what was going on, but there are a couple of characters, I know that, man. This one I'm proud of. I really like this picture because there's nobody else. You know, you don't see any other faces except those two. So it's like this very public, private moment. And I guess women in that time were all wearing the same kind of bag with the long strap. It was in fashion. This woman obviously has arthritis really bad. And, you know, maybe he's looking at mortality. Maybe he's looking at mortality himself. I don't know. At least that's what I, you know, felt when I saw it, when I saw the picture, I mean, on the contact sheet. And I'm very happy for that picture. And even this, you know, that line, you know, going in, you know, these are the kinds of things I'm talking about when, you know, there is good subject matter, like how do you up that, you know, how do you, the Winogrand movie, I don't know if any of you have seen it yet, it's pretty good, but he talks about that in the movie, you know, he says, in one of the interviews, I mean, he didn't know the movie was made. I think he'd be appalled by it. But he said, you know, the trick is how do you make something happen? How do you make something appear more interesting than what's actually happening, or what actually happened? And that, you know, has a lot to do with framing at that last second.
So my question is, what are your thoughts on the ethics of street photography and how have they evolved over the years you've been doing it?
Well, that's a good question. The ethics of street photography, great, thank you. The ethics of street photography are what you can get away with. There are no ethics, you know. It's a sliding scale at every moment. You know, in this case, she's pissed as shit at me for doing it, but she loves it, and she's down with it, and she understands why I'm putting this, you know, big white face, you know, right next to them, and she gets it. And she when I walked by, she gave me the thumbs up. So, you know, the ethics, your own personal ethics, are you do whatever you want to do. And, you know, from the reactions that you get, you know, you may have to scale that back. But I shot with real abandon. I really took a lot of chances in a sense, you know, and you know, also I'm athletic. I was then. I mean, particularly, I was, you know, very quick on my feet. You know, had that fast first step. You know, I was an athlete growing up and stuff. So, you know, I don't know. I was designed for the job, so I never had those. I mean, the only ethics. Again, I'll just bring the flash up again. Those were the only ethics, because there were times when I used the flash when I was overboard. Not without the flash. I never felt weird about a picture I took. But with the flash, it got to the point where I had to stop because I just didn't want to hurt anybody, you know, and it got to the place where it kind of did. But these pictures here, I just want to show a couple of these really quickly. But these are among the photographs that I'm going to edit into a new book, a second book published by the same publisher. And you know, these were not necessarily outtakes. These were not necessarily outtakes from the first book. These were pictures. You know, I live in the country, and it you know, it's dark in the winter, and it's kind of lonely where I live in the winter, and I have a lot of time on my hand, and I got a dark room, and I'm just printing like crazy all the time. Look at that guy. He's got a baby carriage on his back. That's crazy. That's my son at age 10. Another one of these pictures that, you know, asks more questions than it answers. The moment they broke up. St. Mark's Place. This is the guy in Mean Streets. Gene Palma is his name. And then this was the first graffiti artist, Pray. That's the patron saint of graffiti artists, because she wrote Pray. Nobody knew who she was, but they found out later it was a woman, but she just wrote Pray everywhere. That's Gene Poole. He was a great performance artist. Anyway, you get the picture. That was the first flash picture I ever took. That was in Harvard Square on Portriga paper. That's why it's so. That could be Ivanka Trump. I think it is. I'm pretty sure that's Ivanka Trump. I like this picture a lot. Anyway, there's Gildan. No unleashed dogs. Anyway, thank you very much. And
just to piggyback onto
Sure.
the ethics stuff, you have a lot of children in your photos. Were the parents aware? Was it an ethics? Obviously, you're printing them, so I'm just wondering if there's anything different.
my personal feeling is that, you know, once it becomes a photograph, you know, it's something else. It's now a photograph, and because photographs are inherently, you know, variously interpretable, I don't really give that a lot of credence. I mean, I understand that parents can be upset if their kids are being photographed by a stranger because they fear all kinds of things, which is justifiable. I mean, I had a kid myself. I was raising a kid myself, so I understand this. But, you know, I would always say, you know, shoot first and ask questions later. And, you know, deal with the problem, though. You know, if somebody gets upset, you explain to them, you know, this is my thing. I'm a photographer. I'm sorry if I upset you. But, you know, if you have to filter every possible picture through that system, then you know, you may not get any pictures because you're just thinking, And the thing about street photography is that, you know, when done well, you don't think. You know, it's a very Zen act, a very Zen art, you know. You're kind of making an end run around the mind. You're just saying to yourself, if I feel to take a picture, I'm going to take it. And when you do that, you get pictures. You absolutely do. You're unfiltered, right? And so you really want to preserve that. So you've got to be careful not to get too wrapped up in the ethics of it all. It's so rare that somebody gets upset. So if it's 1 in 25,000 photographs that somebody gets mad or even, you know, wants to throw a punch at you, it's such a small figure. And I hate to, you know, anyway, that's it, you know. I wouldn't worry about that, frankly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jaime, for doing this.